If you're leading a finance team in a startup or scale up, you have probably asked to set quarterly KPIs for your team. And I'm going to be honest, whenever I'm asked to do that, it's not an easy thing to do when you're not driving revenue or churning out product features. So this kind of request is much easier if you have many KPIs within your team anyway, like customer services or sales or marketing. So if you've been asked what KPIs you should track for your finance team, I thought I'd put together a list of 10 KPIs that you can review and see if they can fit for you, just to make that request a bit easier for you. Hi, my name's Alysha Randall. I'm a fractional CFO for Fast Growth Consulting, and I also train new and aspiring CFOs within startups or scale ups. And I wrote a book just on that topic, Financial Leadership Fundamentals. And if you are a new or aspiring finance leader within startups or scale ups, then please do click on the subscribe button below. So, the best finance KPIs, they aren't just vanity metrics. So, or there might be something that is just a tick box exercise. So, a perfect example is, and I've certainly put this in as a KPI, and sometimes it might be relevant, is the year end is now completed. Now, you have quite a few compliance things to complete, which is very important, obviously. And if potentially you're being audited, then maybe for that quarter, completing the audit and getting through a successful audit is actually really important. And therefore, it's quite relevant to have a KPI for that. But ideally, you want finance KPIs that really measure the value of the team, and it shows how you add value to the business. How efficient are you? How reliable are you? How strategic are you? And it's actually also a nice way to demonstrate to the business how you and your team do add value. I've found that often when we're setting these quarterly KPIs, the leadership team is often going through the KPIs that they want to set for the quarter just to see if there's an alignment. But also, it helps you to show what you are tracking, what you're interested in, and what are you and your team trying to help with the business. So, whether you're a head of finance, an FD, a new CFO, here are 10 finance team KPIs that you can potentially track the performance of your team and contribute to your next QBR, quarterly business review, or OKR, objective and key results. Number one is month end close time. This is one that you may have measured already. It's probably the one that comes first to mind for me, particularly when I'm thinking about the entire team. So it measures the days from month end to when the books are closed, essentially. So this matters because a fast and accurate close process, so if you're able to close month end quite quickly, then potentially you'll build trust in your numbers. And also, more importantly, it gives the business real timely insights. So if you are giving them the numbers within a few days, they're able to take that information and help the business with decision making for the rest of the month. So it's quite important that you're able to do that quickly. A suggested target would be 5 to 8 working days for startups. If you are, say, 10 to 15 plus, then it might be time to review and improve your month-end process. Number two is forecast accuracy, particularly cash and P&L. So what this measures is the percentage variance between your forecast and your actual results. So this shows how well your team understands the business drivers and how reliable your financial planning is. Ideally, you want to be 10% or less variance on key line items like cash, gross margin, and maybe even EBITDA. But I will caveat this is it is very much dependent on where you are in your business life cycle, because obviously the earlier the stage, the harder this one is to achieve. Because we work with very early stage businesses, I can tell you a lot of our businesses would struggle with this one. So maybe you might want to track this one internally within the finance function, but potentially not publicly until you're a bit more stable and you're able to track it a lot easier. Particularly if you don't have product market fit, and if you want to know what that is, I'll leave a link above and below, and you're still pivoting quite regularly. So I can think of a couple of clients where the budgeting that we do is out of date quite quickly because they are at that very early stage, and therefore tracking that 10% wouldn't work for us. And we are very much doing rolling forecasts because of this variability. Again, I've done a video on rolling forecasts. I'll leave that above and below. But I think once you're a bit more stable, then this is a very good measure. And if you don't achieve that 10%, you can have a look as to why and then hopefully improve your forecasting methodology going forward. So it's a very good way of reviewing how well you are forecasting. Number 3 is report delivery time. Similar to month end, this measures the time between the month end close and the delivery of board and leadership reporting. Sometimes board reporting has to be done by a specific date, that's fine, but particularly leadership reports, whether that's the management accounts for the entire leadership team or the specific operational reports that you send to each leader. This is really important because, as I mentioned with month end, finance really does need to enable decision making and not just lag behind and just report history when the rest of the business has moved on. So if your reporting lands, say, 2 weeks after a close, I can tell you right now, no one's reading it, which sounds horrible, but it's true. So really, you want the reports out within 1 to 2 days of your close. And if you template all of your reports in a software like Fathom or Spotlight, for example, or if you're lucky enough to be an ERP, there shouldn't be any barriers as to why you're not doing that so quickly. Number 4 is outstanding queries resolved. That's in AP, AR, payroll, and perhaps even reporting. So this would measure the percentage of finance queries that are resolved within a selected SLA, service level agreement. So you can decide what that is. I would say 48 hours would be ideal, maybe 72 hours. But this really matters because it reflects your team's responsiveness and essentially your internal service delivery. So I would suggest a target would be 90% of queries are resolved within 2 to 3 business days. Number 5 is automation rate, manual versus automated tasks. And this essentially just measures the percentage of those core processes. So we're thinking financial operations that are automated. So obviously this matters because a lean team can't scale if you're buried with manual work. So you want to track the automation in AP, expenses, payroll, reconciliations, and ideally at least 50% of your repetitive tasks are automated. If you want to look at our latest recommendations in Finance Tech Stack, I'll leave that above and below. I released one quite recently. Number 6 is time spent on strategic versus operational work. So what this would measure is the percentage of time spent on strategic projects versus compliance and admin. And this really matters because you're, particularly as a finance leader, you aren't a bookkeeper, you're a finance leader. And so this might help you shift that focus towards the value added work rather than just compliance and operations. Ideally, 20 to 30% of time is spent on strategic initiatives, so such as pricing, fundraising, scenario planning. And this is a KPI for you as a leader. You can change the percentage depending on who it is in your team. I wouldn't expect a bookkeeper or a finance manager to be spending much time on strategic work, for example. Number 7 is audit and year-end readiness score. So what this measures is it's an internal score or checklist that is completed in preparation. If you're not needing to do audit yet, and you always do a year-end style month-end close, which I would highly recommend, then potentially could even use the data room preparation as your checklist. I often recommend, particularly earlier stage businesses that are wanting to fundraise relatively regularly, that you keep your data room prepared at all times. So if there is an investor that's requesting information, particularly outside a fundraise process, which does happen, you're already ready. Now, this matters obviously because prepared finance team, there's no surprises, especially useful if you're heading into first audit or Series A, as mentioned. Ideally, a target could be that 90 to 100% of the task are completed before year end, or a high percentage of the data room prep or updates are done. Number 8 is team utilization and capacity. So this measures the team workload versus capacity. I think if you're in a finance startup team, it may be that your capacity is stretched beyond what you actually have available. So this is quite important because it might help you spot burnouts or under-resourcing early, and it can be tracked using simple time logs or task tracking tools. We actually use Toggle, obviously because we're a fractional business, keeping timesheets is quite important, but it is something that I recommend you do every so often just to see if there's anything that's a bottleneck or taking up a lot of time. Ideally, 80 to 90% utilization to allow headroom for urgent tasks and strategic work. If it's, say, 150%, then obviously you've got some problems, whether it's looking for further automations or potentially may even need to hire into the team. Number 9 is the number of strategic insights delivered per quarter. This is a really interesting one, actually. So what this measures is how often the team delivers proactive insights that could really shape business decisions. So this really then proves your value as a business partner and not just a compliance and operational function. So this is very interesting, particularly if you have a very operational team and compliance driven team, and you're very good at getting stuff done and keeping the lights on, but potentially not value adding as much as you should. I would say when you're first starting with a business, the first 3 to 6 months, you probably are just focusing on the operational element of the business. But at some point, you need to pivot slightly to be a bit more insightful. So a good target could be 2 to 3 key insights per quarter. And this could be on anything, on pricing improvement, margin analysis, cost saving opportunities, anything that you're quite proactive about rather than being reactive. And finally, number 10 is an internal NPS or Net Promoter Score or feedback rating. So this would measure stakeholder satisfaction with finance. And obviously you would collect this by asking for feedback from the people that you're serving, which is generally the internal team. So why this matters, this kind of shows how well the business understands the values of the finance function, but it can also reveal misalignment early. So if they are expecting something from you and you're not delivering, then your focus then is to kind of close that gap. Whether it's talking to them and saying, actually, we aren't able to provide that data yet because of XYZ, or you'd be better off getting this from the other team. Or ideally, yes, we can do that for you. Give us 4 weeks and then we'll start delivering that to you on a regular basis. A target obviously is 8 to 9 out of 10, for example, particularly from key stakeholders like the C-suite. So that's CEO, COO, and also budget holders. A final thing is you really don't want to overcomplicate this. Yes, I've listed 10 KPIs that you look from, but you probably only want to pick, say, 3, maybe 4 KPIs to start with, ones that really matter for your stage of growth and your team's current challenges, and also the size of your current team. If you're on your own, then you really need to choose KPIs that work for you specifically rather than a larger finance function. So review them quarterly, include some of them in your QBRs and share them with the leadership team. This really then builds confidence in your team and shows that you're not just closing the books, but you're actually building a high performance function. So if you want to become a confident and strategic finance leader in a startup within the next 12 months, then here's your action plan. Number one is to subscribe to this YouTube channel for weekly tips and chat about startup finance leadership. I do post a video every single Thursday. Number two is to read the book Financial Leadership Fundamentals, where you can get clear idea of what's expected to you and how to show up as a leader. At the end of every single chapter, there are actions that you can implement today to kind of demonstrate that. And number three is to join the Financial Leadership Fundamentals course that really fast tracks your growth with structure, support, where we have Q&A sessions and strategy that really works in the real world. So thanks so much for watching. If you have any other suggestions on finance KPIs that really worked for you, I'd love to hear them. So please do leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.